Hello, class. This is your next lesson before we start our first project. Today we are going to go over some more terminology. I know that sounds very boring, but I really want you guys to understand the basis of like digital files and digital work before we start actually working in the software, which will be done on Thursday. And so we're going to do a bit of planning today and learning about different terms and file types and whatnot so that you guys will be prepared for Thursday's course where we actually go through and start creating our first project, which is really exciting. I think it's going to be really fun. I've been having fun planning it. So let's just kind of jump right in here. First, under your modules tab, you're going to have, well, let's see, the course introduction doesn't work. Matter, there will be a couple that are going to be posted in here. Under your, which one was that? The student success, you're going to have file terminology and additive color, alpha channels, and masking. Oh my, we're going to have these two to look at. Don't worry about these. Yep. And then also we're going to have our first project structure. You're going to have an assignment. It's a short assignment for Thursday's class. But let's kind of go through these in a little bit of order here so that you're aware. So the first thing that I want to talk about is file terminology. And these are going to be terms for different documents and different files and different file extensions that you're going to use throughout any kind of digital design career. Um, and so these are things that you're going to want to start to really memorize and take note of. These are important. I would just, if you want to copy and paste these into notes, that's great. But these are going to be terms and information that you're going to hear me say actually quite a bit. Let me do some stuff real quick here. Let's not make that. Let's do heading 4. I just want to add a little bit of hierarchy. Here we go. Some more terms for you guys here so that you can see um, these a little bit better here. So, file types, what are they? These are going to be what we're working in. Any digital software has a certain type of file, right? Either you end up working in a raster-based program or a vector-based program. Now, there is quite a big difference between these programs, and I'm going to explain that to you and then explain to you the type of files that come through, as well as I have an example website I would like you guys to look at. But first, with raster-based images, raster is going to be a pixel-based image that's made up of dots and grids, and they are dependent on your resolution. So if you think of like an HD TV is 1920 by 1080, that 1920 and the 1080, those numbers represent how many pixels. 1920 is your horizontal, so that's going to be from left to right, and 1080 is going to be your amount of pixels that go up and down, right, top to bottom. And that's how many pixels are within uh, that make up that document or that resolution size, right? Now, these are going to be programs like any kind of drawing program is generally like a raster-based software. So Photoshop, um, Procreate Dreams, even, which is an animation software, but it's like a drawing software. It's also raster-based. If you can tell by if zooming really far into an image, and if you see that it's made up of lots of little pixels, then it is a raster-based image, right? These are going to be JPEGs or JPGs, so like any kind of digital picture that you take is a raster-based. It's a pixelated image, right? It is made up of pixels. PNGs, which are kind of a lossless format of an image. Lossless means that it's not compressed, right? There's more data, more information into that image. And PNGs specifically are great because they also support transparency. And they're really good for not only web graphics, but also animation and video editing and different formats like that, and also like compositing imagery inside of Photoshop. Now, GIFs or GIFs, you'll hear them pronounced either way. There's going to be a fight until the end of time and how we pronounce that, whatever, I don't care. But this supports transparency and animation, but they're limited to 256 colors, and they're usually pretty small in size, pretty compressed down. And so, that's why we're able to easily send them through text messages or put them into emails without it really overbearing or loading that email up with data and using a lot of a lot of information, right? A TIFF is a high quality lossless format. It's used for professional printing. Um, you are going to see this a lot you're gonna like you can save TIFF files in photography when you're doing editing. For example, creating Photoshop document for our first project, if we were going to print it, you could use a TIFF format as well. You would use this over anything like a JPEG or a JPG. If you're like sending it to a printing press, you would want to use a TIFF file. BMP is an uncompressed high quality format typically used by Microsoft Windows. I rarely ever actually use this file type. Maybe once or twice have I used it, but mostly I will work in TIFFs, PNGs, and JPEGs, and then GIFs or GIFs. Don't get mad at me how I say it. It is what I do. But I typically use these first four here when creating raster-based art. Now, vector-based art is going to be there's a real benefit to using vector based. In fact, I'm more comfortable using vector based art, but I'll explain the difference between them a little bit more when you might want to use one versus the other. Vector based art uses mathematical formulas to create like different shapes and images and lines based on points on a grid, right? And so it's very they're resolution independent. So you can set a file, let's say at 1920 by 1080 pixels, but the pixel count doesn't matter when it comes to creating a vector file because it can change. Because of the benefit of using mathematical formulas, you can increase the size or decrease the size of the image to any size and it'll still be sharp and crisp, right? So these are really good for creating things like um, logos and any kind of graphics that you're going to be using for marketing and branding. I usually recommend using vector based programs. And the reason being, and this is the benefit of that mathematical formula, is that you can have an image. Let's say you create a logo and you take that logo and you want to put it on a business card for someone, right? Well, then that image is going to be fairly small. But let's say that client comes back to you and they're like, well, now, our business is doing good. We really want to make some signage for our store. Well, we can blow that image up. We can take that logo that you've created and make it big enough for a sign. Let's say the sign is like 2 feet by 3 feet. You can blow that image up to fit that design or that like that aspect ratio or the file type or whatever they want, and it'll still be crisp and it'll still be legible, and it won't be what we call pixelated, right? And that's what you see with raster based images. You could even blow it up to the size of a billboard and it would still be crisp and legible, which is really, really cool. And so that's why I enjoy working using vectors, because you get that flexibility of, well, I don't know how I want to use this right now, but maybe later I want to use this for uh, this or that or whatever you're thinking, And so if you want to have that flexibility, I like using the vector format. And like I said, I really recommend that with marketing and branding. Now, there's a couple different file types that you get with this. EPS is an encapsulated postscript. I've used both of these files. They're very common for printing documents. And then for web documents, you can use SVGs. Now, these are actually also used in crafting. I'm not sure if any of you guys are crafters. I actually love um, doing crafts, arts and crafts and stuff on the side of my work. And I generally use SVG files with a Cricut machine. And so the Cricut machine will take those graphics um, and they can, use them as cut files for things like vinyl. You can use them for, let's say, I think you can use those files are for laser cutting machines and things like that. So, if you design something and if you wanted it cut out of a piece of plywood, or thin like balsa wood, you can use those with Cricut makers, and you can use an SVG file, so you can create your own imagery, right? And then have like custom creations that you're making. But I use both of these. Again, EPS is more for print, and SVG is going to be more for web. Sorry if you guys hear that. That's my dog. She's protecting the house of any people walking by. Now, raster based versus vector. Let's talk a little bit more about how those look a little bit different. Vector based images are going to look very clean. There's not a ton of texture being used or details like highlights, and you can still create those things, but it's more of a workaround to get those. You're likely not going to create a very detailed like painting type of image. So let me see. Oh, perfect example. This here would look almost like a vector image, right? When I open up my web page and you see these very flat looking kind of illustration, right? These are great vector type images. Let me see here. So I can kind of give you a little bit of a different idea of what they look like. You can still see that there is texture in some of these things, right? Like if I click on this, you see that we have gradients here. You see some kind of a texture with this grid of circles. And if we click here, you can see that there's, you still have shadows. You kind of have highlights here as well. So you can fake it in certain ways. If you click here, you can see this. What you don't see is a ton of texture being added into things. And I'll show you the difference here. You do have, like, you can create vector images that look very detailed, right? But it's a little bit different from something like this, right? This would be more, oh, I guess this one is, if I look a little closer, it is a vector file. Yeah, it says right here too. But they're just a little bit less, like you don't have this smooth shading. It doesn't look like it was created with necessarily like paintbrushes and stuff like that, right? It's still kind of very flat. You don't see a lot of form being created, too much of it with just just these like shapes, right? But if we look at the difference between that and a raster image, let's look at this. And here's a great example too. Vector images versus raster images. When we look at what they would be like zoomed in, kind of zooming in here. When you zoom into a vector image, right, look how crisp and clear that image is, versus a raster image right here, and you can see the pixels that are used to make up the image. So there's only so much that you can actually like increase the size of raster images, because once it goes beyond its pixel count, then it starts to look grainy and pixelated, and that's where pixelated comes from. Now, if we look at just raster illustrations, let's just look at, so it gives us more of a idea of how you can get detailed looks. You're going to be able to use like brushes in these programs. You can use Let's see here. This is just a picture. Let's see if I can get an illustration that looks like. Let's look at, actually, you know where's a good place to look? Adobe stock. I'm going to talk about this here. Let's say, let's look up some illustrations. Oh, come on. I know you want to work. Okay. A lot of these that you're going to see are going to be vector. You can tell by file types. Hold on, let me see. Usually something like this. Actually, let's see if we can just go to. See, there's when you go to images, like if you go to the main page on Adobe Stock, you can go search up things by videos, images, templates, those kind of things. Like, so if we're looking for images and we go, all photos are raster based. Let's go to just illustrations here. Great. Like something like this is going to be a raster based image. And you can see by having like these really soft looking gradients that fade into each other, you can, it's almost like, you know, using those, like I said, using those digital brushes to create textures and whatnot. So you can get a lot of detail and a lot of texture into a raster based image, but you have to also plan on how that image is going to be used. Am I going to use this for a poster? Is this going to be used for just like a book, like a small book? You know, you don't want to create a raster based image that's meant for a poster, and then the client comes back and they're like, well, we want this now for a billboard. You're ultimately screwed, and you're going to end up making that image again, and it would be a massive file. Usually raster based files are a little bit bigger. Let's see where else. You know, you just get a little bit more flexibility. So there's like always a downside, and there's always a positive and negative to whatever you're doing. You can combine the two, which I'll talk about later in class. But notice how you get kind of like these textures that seem like almost like they're a pastel or they're a chalk or they're a paint. They look very texturized, right? And that's usually with a raster based image, whereas a vector based image is going to be kind of flat and more graphic looking. Right? When, in fact, when, if I click on this image again, and it brings it up, you can see what type of file type is right here and the dimensions of the image as well. So if you're going to be using this for a project, you can say, is this going to be large enough for my project? And is it the type of file that I need for my project? Versus if I go back here and we go to, I don't know, a vector-based one, images, vectors. Let's look here and we click. A lot of you can see how you can still get texture, but it's just there's limitations on it. But you'll see file type, AI, EPS, and JPEG, so you can choose, right? Usually, if it gives you an option, I always download the AI or EPS file, which is the vector file, because I can always add those textures and create like a raster image later if I wanted to. So it's a little bit, that's why I prefer working in a vector format. But like I said, we're going to work in both for this class. So I'm going to close that out. Now, proprietary, let's move forward. What are proprietary files are going to be specific files that are to a certain software. So for Photoshop, you're going to see a file extension. What is a file extension? Let me just show you real quick. If I go to here and I go into Photoshop, where I've already started one. And if I click on, let's see, the view can be details right here. It will say, with type under here, it will tell you what type of file this is, an Adobe Photoshop image. So if I were to hover over here, usually you can see the extension. No, it tells you the type there. Let me see if they give you that information anymore. Content, no. Images, details. But if it says like the file type and it's an Adobe Photoshop file, or sometimes you'll see ones that are like PDF is specifically for Adobe Acrobat, right? And Illustrator has a .ai file when you create it, so it'll have .ai. Let's go into here under our assets. Um, like for instance, right here, this is an MP4, and let's go to details on here. And you can see what file type is that. That is right there. It's MP4 is a video file, right? So if I click this and I want to play it, it is a video format. You're going to see all this stuff later. And then if we go into, I have this split up as vector. Let's say I go to here and you can see Adobe Illustrator artwork work. So usually it's a .ai when you go to save it. And so that's what a proprietary file is. It's specifically made for that software. You're not really going to be able to open it up anywhere else. So you always want to save, you're going to always want to save your file in a proprietary format, right? Like I always save it in a PSD. But then also, I usually export it. Exporting means to save it in a different format, in a different file format. And I usually will export or save it as like also a PNG or sometimes a JPEG. With proprietary software, you can save images or artwork or designs as these type of files here, as any raster or vector file. So let's say I created an image inside of Photoshop, and then I'm ready to have a finalized thing ready for anyone to open, right? Because not everyone has this proprietary software, right? So we have to think ahead of that. And so I would want to send it to my friend. Let's say I created a piece of artwork I want to send to my friend, but I know my friend doesn't work in the art field, isn't in the design field, and doesn't have Photoshop. So I would want to send it to them as like a JPEG or a PNG or a GIF. Usually they're not going to have, they can probably open a TIFF as well, but it's going to be a little bit harder to open in just regular software. And then the vector format, you're going to want to send it over like an Adobe Illustrator, for example, is a vector-based program. And you're going to want to send over, like your client says, I want the vector I want it in a vector format. And you're going to want to send them an EPS or an SVG. You're never going to send them the proprietary, because the proprietary software is going to allow people to edit it as well. And you don't want people editing your work, right? That's your work. You spent a lot of time and energy into that, and so you don't just give that free information away, right? So for this class, you're going to be working and saving your stuff in proprietary formats, but you're going to be turning into me either a raster or a vector file type. So I'll tell you what I'm expecting in your deliverables information. Some other quality and characteristics and information and terminology that you guys should know about. Resolution is the level of detail or clarity that an image has. It's usually measured in dots per inch, DPI, which is for printing, right? So you have to think how many DPI, like it says, dots per inch. That's how many dots of ink go into every square inch on an image, right? And so and that's how the printer decides like how much detail you can get into an image. Usually when it comes to digital imagery, when you're knowing you're going to print something, you always want to work at 300 DPI. And that's like a high resolution, that gives these printers the ability to print larger images of it, right? Or there's pixel per inch, which is for screen, right? How many pixels are in each inch on your screen, right? So that's kind of that is exactly what resolution is. For example, resolution for an HD TV or, yeah, just HD television, regular, not 4K, not standard definition, but an HD TV is 1920 by 1080. Um, we'll touch base. You'll hear me say a little bit more about this. Specifically, DPI is going to be something you're going to see when we're starting new files on Thursday, or pixels per inch. And usually we're going to create things in this class for screens, but I think we're also going to prepare stuff for print as well, just in case. CMYK, again, you guys should have watched that video regarding color. That's a color model for print, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Key, K is for black. Um, which is a subtractive color mode, which we're going to talk about here shortly. And this is specifically for printing when using software. So let's say we're getting ready to create a poster in Photoshop, and we know that poster is going to be printed, so we're going to want to set up our resolution to have a DPI, right, because we're going to print it. And also we would want to work in the color mode CMYK. Now, if I were creating an image just for online use, let's say I'm making a web banner and they want it vector, I'm going to work in Illustrator, and I'm going to create like an SV, most likely an SVG, right? Because that's not used for print. EPS is more for print. SVG is for web. And so we're going to create an image in Illustrator, and we're going to create it at, let's say, 1920 by 1080. It doesn't necessarily matter as much, but let's say that's the size of the advertisement that they want for TV, right? So we're going to create it at 1920 by 1080, which would be the resolution. And for screens, you don't need as many dots per, like you don't need as many pixels per inch to create a nice, sharp, crisp image. The highest you really have to go is, or the lowest you really have to go is 72 dots per inch, or pixels per inch. I'm so sorry, my words are mixing up. Let's rephrase that. The lowest that you should go for web or for screens for your pixels per inch is 72 ppi. Okay. And then you would work in an RGB color model, which is for screens, right? Red, green, and blue. And this is a subtractive color, or I'm sorry, an additive. CMYK is subtractive, RGB is an additive, and we will talk about that here in a second. File size is the amount of storage space that the image file uses. It's usually measured in kilobytes, which is really small, megabytes, which is a little bit bigger, but usually you can send emails still with something that's like a lower megabyte size. And then you have gigabytes, which is a large file. Some very detailed projects will be, your file sizes will be in gigabytes. Most likely, it's going to be when processing things like videos and animations and stuff like that is where you get these really big file sizes. There's even larger than that. You have terabytes and so on and so forth. Compression is the process of reducing an image's file size, right? JPEGs are compressed images. PNGs are lossless, like I was saying before. There's more information there. Lossy removes some image data to achieve a smaller file size. That's why you're going to see a lot of people are like, oh, well, just send me the JPEG image of it because I just need to see it. I don't need to print it. It doesn't need to be anything like super, there doesn't have to be a lot of data in it. Just send me the JPEG, right? It's just a little bit easier when you're doing that, to just send a smaller file size. Now, lossless reduces the file size, but without any loss of image data, right? So you're still going to have all the image data that you need in there, but it's the file size will still be a little bit bigger, but it's still not as big. You're usually not going to get gigabytes or anything with lossless. But again, PNG is a lossless format, and it also allows for transparency. Pixel dimensions is the width and height of an image in pixels. So like I was talking about, so pixels are for like mostly for screen. I mean, you're also going to have pixels as far as um, like print and stuff, because you have to know how many uh, are within that area. But like I've been using as an example with HD. The pixel dimension of HD is 1920, 1920 pixels from left to right, and 1080, 1080 pixels from top to bottom. Aspect ratio is the proportional relationship between an image's width and height. So you guys most likely we won't really talk too much about aspect ratio until we get into the using After Effects once we jump into that software. Now, transparency is ability for parts of an images to be see-through, right? We're going to talk about this next. I have a whole section that talks about the transparency for you guys. And metadata is the data that is embedded within a file that includes like camera settings, dimensions, keywords, location. Um, that's a lot of metadata. That's how they pin murders and stuff, which I know that's dark, but it's true. You know, they have metadata is in everything, every image we take, wherever we go, there's metadata. We leave digital footprints everywhere, and images and files can hold that information. Now, I implore you to go to this Adobe webpage and read a little bit more about vector versus raster. It's a really good read, very quick read as well. So I'm going to publish this and have that ready for you. Now, on to the next one. Additive color, alpha channels, and masking. Oh my. So let's talk a little bit about additive versus subtractive colors. And this is going to be important when it comes to understanding why we use certain modes and models within our work, depending on what is going to be for, right? So additive in subtractive color, it refers to the ways of mixing color, but how the light passes through the color, right? Are we adding light or are we subtracting light from something? And so additive color is used with that light. Remember, additive is going to be red, green, blue for screens, right? It's used with lights such as screens or digital displays and combines the primary colors RGB. And when these colors are mixed together in different amounts, they not only create different colors, but when they're fully combined at full intensity, it creates a white light, right? You have to start thinking of additive color and subtractive color being like, what forms are they? And since additive color is going to be digital, when you take apart a screen, what is it made of? It's not made of different inks and paints. It's made of light. It's made of tiny little red, green, and blue light bulbs that light up to create at different intensities to create different values of colors, right? Different mixing of colors. And so when they're fully on and they're at full intensity, it's going to create white on your screen. But like, let's think what happens when you turn your screen off, everything's black. Well, that's because all those little lights, those red, green, blue lights are off, right? And so that's what additive color is referring to. Now, when we're talking about subtractive color, that's going to be referring to colors that utilize things like pigments, inks, paints, things of the sort like that, right? Um, you're going to combine more primary colors to they absorb the light, right? They're going to subtract the wavelengths of the light. And when they're mixed together, they'll create black or brown. So like when you're using RGB format in an additive color, you mix all the colors and you get white because that's light, right? Emitting from tiny little lights on your screen. And when you're using pigments or paints, if we go back to like primary school and we mix all the colors together, all the primary colors, which are red, blue, and yellow, and when we mix those all together, we get black or we get like a dark color, right? Because we're subtracting the light wavelengths from that. And so less light is reflected back into your eye when you're looking at subtractive color mixing. Now, cyan, magenta, and yellow are the ink colors that are used on a printer. And so that's why CMY, and then they create K, which is black, which is all the colors combined, right? And so I really want you guys to look at this additive versus subtractive link right here. If you click on it, it talks a lot more about this. It gives you a lot more detail about using it in the digital field. I want you guys to read this because it's going to help you understand the basics of color and using additive versus subtractive color, right? Because if we're going to print it, we're going to want to use subtractive color format, which is CMYK. But if we're just using it for like a banner or web ad or video for TV or something, we're going to want to work in RGB, which is an additive color profile. Alpha channels and the benefits of transparency, right? An alpha channel is a special channel in the digital image that controls the transparency, right? Transparency is whether something is see-through or not. When you can see through it, it's transparent, like a piece of glass, right? But if or like, let's say you have a piece of acrylic that's colored, but you can still see through it, that still has a transparency to it versus you pick up a gosh, I don't know, like a piece of paper and you look at that piece of paper and it's fully white. It's not it has no transparency to it, right? It's fully opaque. And so what this does when it comes to transparency in the digital format, it is called an alpha channel, right? And an alpha channel is different than using your RGB. It combines with like your colors, right? But it's a completely different like aspect or section of using digital art. So it kind of adds with your RGB alpha. It adds with your colors, right, to create transparency or opaqueness. And it determines how opaque or transparent each pixel is. So when a pixel has full alpha, which is 255, the value goes up to 255, um, or it's like 100% of the value of the alpha channel, then it's going to be fully opaque. You're not going to be able to see through it at all. But if you have zero alpha channel, which is 0% or zero, it's going to be fully transparent. So you're not going to see at all. There's not going to be any color there, anything missing. If you were to move that around, like think of an image on a clear piece of paper, or like let's say you have a clear piece of plastic, and then you have an image painted on it. And the image is opaque, but everywhere around it is transparent. That's fully transparent all around, and then that image itself has full. It's got full alpha or full transparency, is what you'll hear me say, and that's going to be like 200. The value is going to be 255 or 100%, and so it can be a little bit confusing until we start working with that, but it allows you to really like blend things smoothly and layer things when you're creating a composition. And a composition means like a design or your layout. So this example says when creating cutouts, overlays, or compositing effects in digital design and video, alpha channels are essential for creating like clean edges and realistic layering in visual projects. And there's a little bit of a deep dive here into alpha channels and what they look like. And it gives you an idea based on, here's great sources, right? This first image has a fully white background. So if I were to move that image over top of this image, it would block everything off because the background is fully white, right? It has 100% alpha channel. And if we were to look at two, it has like a checkerboard background, which usually indicates when you're working in digital format that that is fully transparent around that area, right? And so that would be, nothing would be there. No RGB values, right? No color or anything is there. So if you were to move this around, it would almost look like the dice were cut out of a piece of paper and moving around. Versus this, which would just look like it was printed on a piece of paper. And now, if we were to combine those and we look at three, it's a grayscale image of the alpha channel, right? The lighter areas are going to be more opaque, harder to see through, whereas the darker areas are going to be transparent. And I know that's kind of hard for your head to grasp, but once we start working inside of Photoshop, you're going to be able to see, because we're going to be working with masking and alpha channels and whatnot, and you'll be able to understand it and grasp the concept a little bit more. Like down at the bottom right here of this color like scale or color chart, you can see down at the bottom, you can't see any of those checkerboard pattern right under there, which means it's fully opaque, versus the top where you can see it completely is, it's has zero alpha value on it. So Definitely want to read this and understand alpha channels because these are going to be really important in our upcoming project on Thursday. Now, this gives a little bit of an example, the alpha blend, 3 layers over white, and it shows you the blending order. So it shows you the alpha value, right? So from 0 to 255, 0 being fully transparent and 255 being fully opaque, you have an alpha 64, which is going to be like 75% transparency, which it shows you down here, right? So if your client says, "Oh, I like that, but I want it 50% transparent," then you're going to know your alpha number is going to have to be 127. But most of the time, it usually works in percentages in the software anyway, so you would just drop the transparency down to 50%. But if you wanted to know or understand the values, this is where you're going to understand that. And it will show that as well when we start looking in the software and start working with these. Masking. It's more than just for Halloween, right? Masking in design, um, it's a technique used to control which part of the image that is visible to the person, right? So we're basically taking parts and we can hide parts of them, we can reveal parts of them using masking. And in the best example is like thinking of a stencil or a cutout over your artwork. Only areas within the mask are shown, right? So if you were to cut, like, here's an example. We have an image. We have the image two. And we just want the girl's face to be over top of image two. I know these are weird images to combine, but it's a great example of how to do it. And we want to take that mask and we want to essentially like, we take the mask and we cut out a circle because that's all we want to see of our model's face. And we place that over the image that we want masked, and it will show only that part of the image. So this is what the mask looks like, and over top of your first image, you can mask just that section of the image over top of the other one. So it's great because you can use masking in different layers. This is a really powerful technique to use, and you use it in all sorts of programs. You're going to use it in Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects. But it helps to bring emphasis on visual parts of your image, and we're going to use this a lot in class. So I definitely recommend you should watch this short video that talks about layer masks inside of Photoshop. Very common inside of Photoshop and After Effects. And Illustrator is a little bit more difficult to do masking because of the vector format of it, but it's very possible to do. It's just the steps are a little bit different. And so I definitely want you guys to look at this page and read through these different links. And now let's hop over to your assignment for today. So the first assignment that we're going to do for this class, or the first project that we're going to create for this class, is going to be inside of Photoshop. And we're going to be creating either a movie or a music poster. You can decide which one you want to do. But the first thing I want you guys to do is plan this project out. I don't want you guys to just go into Photoshop and start throwing things around in there. I want you to start to think of these principles of design, which we have already learned, and combine those principles to create some sketches and some layouts that are really going to work well and be more powerful than if we go into this project without a plan, right? And so the first paragraph here is, do we need to sketch our ideas out? Yes, let's do it. Let's plan this. When you're going to build a house, you don't just go buy the lumber and start building, right? You have to have blueprints. You have to have a plan that tells you, oh, I need to measure here. I need to have this much here. I'm going to need this here, right? And so plans are crucial in any kind of project that you're creating, whether it's an art project, a building project, a writing project. You have to plan it out. And so we do that by ideation sketching, right? It's just creating simple sketches that plan and visualize your idea before committing to a design, right? This is a great way to be like, this doesn't really work out here. And the thing about it is that it doesn't have to be detailed. You don't have to be a great illustrator, a great artist to do sketching, right? It can be very basic shapes. It can be very, as long as you understand what you're looking at, mostly. I mean, someone else should be able to pick it up and understand a little bit of what's going on. but it's really more of figuring out what the layout is kind of ties into the first project that you guys had of picking those principles of design and designing images using simple geometric or organic shapes to create a layout that shows each one, right? And so we're going to start to combine those principles of design to make a full composition. And by composition, I mean like a fully realized scene or image. Um, and so, yes, I want you guys to sketch. I want you to start planning things out. In animation, it's called storyboarding. Um, it's like creating a web for like a writing web for creating like a story or an essay, right? So we all know how to do those. And this is just a visual version of that. But it helps to like clarify a lot of things for you. Your creative direction, it's going to help you save time because you're going to be like, oh, I need to get this asset, this asset, this asset. Assets are just different collection of things that you need to have to create whatever you're going to be making, right? And I'll walk you through those here in a minute. But here's a couple quick examples of some ideation sketches, right? Here, let me make this one a little bit bigger if I can. Uh, this one's a little bit harder to see. There we go. This image that you see, it's all stick figures, but it gets the point across of what you need to do. And this is more of this is a storyboard, right? So it's got writing along with it, and it's going to show kind of how motion will be for something. It's going to tell more of a story versus what we're doing for this is more of a design, right? So you're going to start off with like something, an idea, and you're going to start sketching it. And then you're going to be like, okay, I like this part of it, but let's like move on. And the more you start sketching, the more these other creative ideas and more layered ideas start to come to your mind. And so, when we first start to do like a sketch or two, it's very basic. It's going to be something that's not going to be super creative, that's a little bit easier to think of. But as we're like, oh, I like this, but what about it do I not like? Let's think of a different way to show this, is when you start to get some really creative ideas. And so for our first project, we're going to be, like I said, creating that poster in Photoshop, but we're going to be doing some sketching first. Um, we need we need to have that plan. So I want you guys to create 5 to 6 rough sketches that show your design layout for your poster. Now, this poster can be a movie poster. It can be a festival, a music festival, or a music show poster. And I'll kind of show how I went through these ideas for mine here in a second. I show a sped up example where I use Procreate to sketch out some stuff down here in a little video. Um, and it's just a time lapse of just quick sketches. I probably spent about 30 to 45 minutes doing some quick sketches here just to kind of get a layout that I really liked with it, with the text that I had and imagery that I had in my mind. And so I'm creating a music festival poster for uh, a heavy metal music festival, right? And I named it Heavy Hitters Metal Fest, or Heavy Hitters Metal Festival. And so you see in the first one, I kind of write it down a certain way, and I decide I don't really like that. Um, when we go through and we play this, you're going to see how I started. I have a few different boxes that give me an idea. Okay, they're about poster size. Let's kind of create something that looks like a skull. And then I was like, oh, maybe I don't want like a regular skull. Maybe I want a ram's head, right? And then I decided maybe I don't want that when moving to the next design. Let's see what it looks like with a regular skull. And playing around with the sizes of it, playing around with maybe the perspective of where that skull is and the shape. Of course, like I said, it doesn't have to be anything super nice or crazy. It just has to essentially um, be able to communicate your idea across, right? And so that's kind of, I want you guys to just see how my process was when creating this. Now, when you go to start creating this stuff, I want you to start to think and I want you to start to look at examples of what you're going to do, right? So if you're going to do a music poster, let's say you want to do for mine, I wanted to do the metal festival, right? So metal metal music festival poster is what I searched up. And I just go to images and I start to gather ideas on how these look. Like, what kind of imagery do I see a lot in this? I see a lot of skulls. And I did this before I even started sketching. So I started to gather some images. Like, if I liked this, I could right click on it and click save image, right? And maybe I want to save image here to my folder. And then I go to Miro. Let me see. Let's sign into here. And let's say I wanted to create a Miro board with some of my ideas. I could go to the new board and just start adding ideas into this, right? Miro isn't going to be, you don't have to use Miro, but it is just a good virtual version of a storyboarding or idea boards, right? And you guys can you can just save this stuff into a folder if you want to as well. I have also saved things if I go to my main folder, which I've told you guys how to set up your folders, right? Um, and if you go to this, I've added a little folder at the top with 000, so it places that folder at the very top. And I put ideas, and then I have screenshots of some of the ideas that I like about it. What I like about them, like if I look at this, I'm like, oh, I really like the grunginess of this imagery. And grunginess means like that texture, that kind of rough looking scattery texture of it, like noisy or grainy texture. I like the skull. Specifically, I like the multiple skulls. I like the animal use of animals in here as well. I'm not this one. I mean, the color's okay. It's just a single color, but I'm starting to like look at this information and gather this information. Right. This looks really cool. I love not only the texture of it, right? I love the imagery. I love how they stretched out the jaw to put the text inside of this, which is really creative, right? So when you're looking at examples online, start to see what is it about this image that I like. Do I like the color? Like, what kind of things am I starting to see as like a pattern when I look at this information? If I'm just looking at this page right here, I see the pattern black. There's a lot of use of black, very dark colors, very kind of like some muted colors here, but there's also some very vibrant, rich colors, like these bright reds, bright oranges. I see a lot of bright greens. I see a lot of in metal posters as well. You see that here. But generally, like warmer tones. So yellows, reds, oranges, blacks. Um, and very graphic looking, very bold imagery. The text is very unique and stuff for this. A lot of the text is either it goes one way where it's very bold and blocky text, or it goes another way where it's almost illegible, right? We all make fun of how metalheads, obviously I'm a metalhead, but like how they create this kind of tribal looking logos or imagery, and they just are almost illegible, right? But that's the whole point of it. Hard to read. They took the rules when creating text for metal things and they broke those rules, and um, it became part of the culture for metal music. And so that's a big thing. That's how you break through, how designs break through into your culture and stuff like that. And so start to look at things, start to gather these ideas. I have a list of questions here when you're looking through these of what types of things to look for, right? When you're gathering that visual information for yourself and doing that research and development. Ask these questions. What types of imagery are being used? What kinds of fonts do I see? And like I said, we'll dive deeper into this later, but like general style, like is it big and blocky? Is it kind of, does it look like Times New Roman where it has a little feet at the top and the bottom? Do you have, not a lot of these are going to have script writing on it, which is like cursive, right? You're not going to see a lot of that. If I go in to look at movie posters, let's look at some movie posters if you guys decide to do those. I see here is a huge theme with movie posters right here, right off the bat. When there's multiple casts that when there's multiple cast members that are important to the show, they show that person up front and center. They are the biggest thing. They draw emphasis by size, by placement of the object or of the subject. And then the other subjects are much smaller, usually surrounding and somehow drawing emphasis to the main subject. Now, if I look here as well, you see a lot of color gives a lot of mood. Like with Dune, you see complementary colors of orange and blue, right? Orange at different tones, like you see um, a very deeply saturated down at the bottom, which is almost like a brown colored orange, and a very muted colored blue up at the top, and it gives this very moody feel to the imagery. When we look at this one for the Joker for Joaquin Phoenix, everything around it is very like muted color, like very natural colors, browns and grays and very light yellows. But himself is bright red, yellow, green, very vibrant colors that are important to drawing emphasis to that imagery. And so you start to look at this, and maybe you have a movie that you're really into, like Lord of the Rings. This is really cool. Great movie poster for Lord of the Rings. It starts to tell a story, right? We see our characters on a journey, which is the whole movie series, and the whole book is about a journey, right, to Middle Earth. And so we see that journey happening here. We see the mountain more, like we see. I think this is. I don't know if this is Moria or if it's like the mountains that we're going to pass to get to Mordor. Gandalf, the leader of the pack, pretty much the head of the tribe, the head honcho, the man in charge, right? He's front and center here. Even though we would like to think that it would be Frodo or Samwise or something like that. Um, they are main characters, but you see like the main person that has all the knowledge, that has all the information, that leads this journey is Gandalf. And so that's why they use his as the imagery. The clever use of his hat to create the mountains, and then this part in his hair and his beard where his shoulder would be to show Gollum, who is also an integral part. And then we have this really cool text that looks very fantastical, right? It's a fantasy. It's a serif font, and serif means with the feet, right? It's French for these little things here at the bottom are like the little feet that hang off the text. And it gives this feeling of old and traditional. And so they're using this serif font to kind of also add to the feeling of the imagery. So these are the types of things I want you guys to start looking for. I don't expect you to be amazing professional graphic designers right off the bat, but just start to look at this stuff when you're seeing imagery and you're seeing design and how intentional those things are to you. Also, how is hierarchy and emphasis being used specifically in here? And these ones, what I was talking about, like hierarchy, Oppenheimer. Obviously, he's the main subject, but the bomb in the background is also a big part of the theme of the film. It's about creating the atomic bomb, right? And so, because of that large part of the film, it's the creator of the atomic bomb, and then also um, the bomb behind. But it draws the emphasis to him using lighting, using color, using him being centered in the image as well. It's telling that story. So, what do I want you guys to do? Let's talk about that. Please note, I want you guys to note that detail is not important during this step, right? We're focusing on layout of our poster. So you can use squiggle lines to represent text. Notice how I did this here. You can use simple shapes to represent objects, just giving it a little bit of detail, like showing this little ram's head that I had, like maybe I wanted to use an animal skull. Does it look like a great animal skull? Absolutely not. It looks like simple shapes thrown together. Is the perspective right on it? No, who cares? It's just getting the idea across, right? Um, you can, you don't, this doesn't have to be colored. It can be done with pencil and paper or pen and paper even. You can do it on lined paper if you want to, or like paper with a grid on it. But it doesn't have to be super detailed and perfect. It's meant to be quick. It's meant to get your ideas out and flowing and going and like looking at layout and looking at the planning of the composition, right? And so if you can use a digital art program, that's great. If you have the knowledge and the tools, I see some of you do. So, like using Procreate or Fresco or any kind of drawing app that you have, even if it's just a note-taking app on an iPad or a tablet, you can use that, right? It's not a requirement, but it's an option. And if you don't have those options or you don't have those skills, just use a piece of paper and a pencil. Everyone has that, or even a pen around the house, right? You can use scrap paper. I don't even care if it's like, try to use a blank piece of paper if you can, like use printer paper. It doesn't matter what it is, just, grabbing what you have. Um, but when you have your sketches complete, I want you to mark your preferred sketch with the layout that you like the most, right? You can do this by circling it, by drawing arrows around it, or stars or something. I did this here at the end of it here. Let's see, let's swing over to the end. I put arrows pointing to what one I like the most, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going more with this design right here. And so, I want you to draw some kind of emphasis towards the design that you are looking to use for your poster. And then I want you to take a photo of your sketches. If you're using pencil and paper, you can take a picture with your cell phone and submit that picture, or you can export an image as a JPEG, right? A JPG, a lossless compressed image, or a lossy, I'm sorry, because it's compressed image and submit it into this assignment. Okay. So the deliverables, 5 to 6 sketches showing the layout and planning for your first project. It can be either a poster or movie design. Can mark it up on there, whatever you want it to be. Draw emphasis to the layout that you're going to use for your project, and then take a photo or export the image and submit it here into Canvas. You don't need to post this into Discord. We'll post our final work into Discord. And you can use your cell phone to take a picture of your sketches as well. So this is going to be due on Thursday. I want you guys to, work, spend about an hour on these sketches. 45 minutes to an hour is great. And just throw ideas down, right? They don't have to look good. They don't have to make sense. They don't have to, like in the beginning, right? Because it's going to build up to it. If you end up doing more sketches, you're like, you know what, 5 or 6 isn't a lot because it's really not a lot. I feel like that's a good amount for you guys to get done within the time. But like, usually if I'm pumping out sketches, the longer I'm going at it, the more and more I'm like, okay, I'm getting to a place where I really like the layout of my design or the plan of my design, right? So I'm only requiring a minimum of 5 to 6, but if you have more ideas, throw them in there. And then you're going to submit this in here. And then Thursday, I'm going to create a video that's going to take us through Photoshop, the basics of Photoshop, and then we're going to start creating our first project. So November 6th is when this is due. Take about an hour to do it. 5 to 6 sketches. Like I said, don't have to be detailed. They can be like this. Text can be like scribbles, because you have to notice, like, especially when I looked at the music posters, like if I start to look at this, what kind of text do I have on all these images? Usually I have a bunch of bands named. I don't like this list format of it. I like to see more imagery. So we're thinking like poster, right? Like a rock poster. Look at how this uses some white space or negative space down at the bottom so that we can see the names of the people performing, right? It's got a date on here. It's got the title of a rock festival. Same with here. The rock festival, what kind of stuff is going to be played, the bands or the types of music that's going to be played, the date here, the time, all those things matter, right? So, and maybe you just put random dates or something like that, and you come up with the name of your poster, or your design, or your festival, or your movie. Like I said, you can use festivals or movies that already exist, shows that are coming out, so on and so forth. Also, you'll look for the same thing. when it comes to like a movie poster as well. So that's the end of this lesson right now. I think we're cutting it at about an hour. Please let me know right away if you guys have any questions, but I look forward to seeing your layouts.